อ Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Africam live at the Waterhole with WildEarth. My name is Ben Coley, and I will be with you for the next couple of hours as we explore some of the incredible scenes, hopefully, at a variety of our cameras situated throughout Africa. We have some in South Africa, some in Zimbabwe, even up into Kenya, and hopefully it will live up to expectations as it did yesterday. We had a fantastic day yesterday filled with some very unusual sightings, which we'll get into a little bit later. But thanks very much for joining me. Don't forget that if you're watching on the app and if you're watching on our website, you can register and send in any questions, comments, anything you'd like to see, anything you'd like to know more about. And I will do my absolute best where I can to answer any of those questions. And if I can't answer those questions, then it gives me some excellent reason to go and do some more research, because every day is a school day, as they say, and it's always interesting to dig up some information on things that we don't know. So please do send in your questions and comments. But we've started this afternoon at Tau Game Lodge in Madikwe in the northwest of South Africa, where those of you who joined us yesterday would have seen something quite special, something that I've never seen either in nearly 20 years of working in the African bush, as we watched a crocodile eating a snake. Now, we weren't sure what snake it was. It was a little bit difficult to ascertain any particular detail from what we were looking at, but my gut said it was some sort of a elapid, some sort of cobra, maybe a snouted or a spitting cobra, because I'm fairly sure I saw a sort of a bit of a flattened neck at one point when the poor lifeless snake was lifted out of the water. But very, very unusual to see. I've seen crocodiles taking mammals, seen crocodiles taking fish, but have never yet seen one until now eating a snake. So that was pretty incredible to watch, certainly. We were having quite a few debates as to what had happened to the snake, because we didn't see any obvious hunting activity from the crocodile. Whether or not the snake was already deceased and on the bottom of the water and the crocodile found it, or possibly the crocodile had grabbed it out of shot and then merely happened to come into shot. But he didn't seem in any particular hurry to digest his food and chew it, but we did see him swallow it, so that was pretty amazing. No sign of our crocodile yet today, although I'm sure he is masquerading somewhere in the murky depths of the waterhole at Tau, but it does look as if we've got a nice little group of wildebeest and of zebra, and it's centre stage at the front what looks to be a grey heron with a few other birds flitting around in the background, enjoying another lovely day up in the northwest. Good morning to you, Casper, as well. Thanks for sending in your little notes there. Glad to hear it's sunny in Milwaukee, and amazing to think that we are connecting with people across the globe and in different time zones. It makes it very special to know that we can have an effect on people throughout the world, and that so many people enjoy these very serene, tranquil, and sometimes exciting scenes that we can bring you. I hope you're all sitting there with your relevant beverages. I, for one, am sitting here with a cup of tea. I am coming to you live from England at the moment. I'm visiting family and friends, so I felt it was only right to have a cup of tea. Connie, yes, you're right. There was an amazing sighting yesterday. Say, you just never know what you're going to get. We say it time and time again, and over the years, people often ask, why do you do this job, or what is it that appeals to you, or how are you still doing it after so long with the antisocial hours and everything else? And what we saw yesterday was a perfect example of it. I personally just love the unpredictable nature of it. You get quiet days and you get incredible days, action-packed, and every so often you see something that you've never seen before, and that's what makes it so special, that unpredictable nature of nature. Seeing how all the organisms interact with one another to create this stable ecosystem, I think is quite the honour. The Nanny, good afternoon to you as well from a dreary Derbyshire in the UK. I'm sorry it's dreary where you are, but it is the UK, so unsurprising. Although I have to say, down where I am, which is currently in the southwest, I'm in and around the Dorset area at the moment. We've had a couple of days of I'm not exactly going to say radiant sunshine. Ambient temperature has been pretty cool, but it's been sunny at least. A little more overcast today, but we will take it. There is no rain in the air. Of course, up there, up there or down there, depending on your perspective, of course. In Africa, we are coming into very much into autumn now, and the temperatures are going to start dropping significantly. Still be nice and warm during the day, but once the sun drops below the horizon, that ambient air temperature will cool relatively quickly, and by the time we get into midwinter, which of course in the southern hemisphere will be around the July, August time, it can get very cold, down to minus figures, and we even do get snow in some parts of the country, so don't be fooled. It may be Africa, but it can also be relatively cool. Okay, speaking of all this weather talk, I think whilst we're enjoying this view of the zebra and the wildebeest, let's see what the weather is doing in all of our different locations. Okay, so you can see for most of the African locations we've got, it's a very nice day. So it looks about 30 degrees in Madikwe, which is a lovely temperature. It's when it gets up into the high 30s and the low 40s it starts to get a little bit more difficult to deal with. But these animals very much enjoying the afternoon sun. And the perfect place to be next to that fantastic waterhole at Tower. If you've ever stayed at Tower Lodge, you have a perfect view of it from all of the rooms, and it does bring an awful lot of activity to this area of the park, certainly. This little aggregation of herbivores seems to be quite content, just soaking up some of the sun. Zebras, of course, one of the animals that don't seem to be too affected by the oppressive heat at times. Those stripe patterns, amongst many other roles that they do serve, very good at regulating temperature. And so zebras well known for having a very fatty subcutaneous layer, which acts like a bit of insulation. So once a cooler body temperature is reached, it's a lot harder in order for that heat to penetrate through that fatty layer. But I've seen zebras standing out in the open quite happily in high 40s almost. The hottest I've ever had it in South Africa was 48. That was not a pleasant day. We were fighting fires as well on that day, which made it even worse. Incredibly humid. And yes, very, very uncomfortable. A couple of other messages come through. Hey 40, good to hear from you again. Good afternoon to you as well. Also in England, good to know, and in the south. Yeah, looking forward to seeing what we find at the waterholes today, as are we all. But so far away and feeling so very close. Isn't technology amazing that yeah, I can be sitting here in England watching camera feeds from Africa, communicating with you, wonderful people from all over the globe. We're very, very fortunate to live in this technologically dominated age. At times it can be a little bit too much, and we certainly have lost a sense of being to some extent, and finding the ability to disconnect when the time is right. But used for the right purposes, what we have at our disposal these days can be a very, very special experience. Caitlin Boss, good afternoon to you as well. You want to know whether zebras and wildebeest generally get along? Well, as you can see, yeah, absolutely. There's no great competition between them. They're both herbivores, so there is no predation-prey relationship to worry about there. And like many animals, they often choose to associate together. It's one of the most common groupings of different mammal species that you'll find out in Africa, because they both benefit from one another in a variety of fashions. First and foremost, they both have very keen eyesight. They both occupy very similar ecological niches and habitats. So they help each other by keeping an eye out for predators because being of a very similar weight and size to each other, they generally attract the same predator, which would be lion and hyena. And for the younger members, obviously leopard being a concern, and wild dogs. So they're always on the lookout, and animals have learned each other's alarm calls. So if a zebra or a wildebeest was to spot any danger, they would give off their alarm calls. So in zebra, it's that sort of whistling. I tried to mimic it yesterday, but it's a sort of almost like a hooting sound that they give off, and there's the wildebeest snort, and those animals will key off those cues, and also be on the lookout for any danger. And in terms of competition for food, there isn't a great deal as well, just because of the different digestive systems that these animals have. So the wildebeest lying down, the blue wildebeest or brindled gnu in this case, are ruminants, whereas the zebras are what we call hindgut fermenters. And that means they prefer different types and different quality of produce. So if you take a sort of a standard blade of grass, generally speaking, the nutritious bits are down towards the bottom. The top bits, particularly when grass gets taller, it becomes more fibrous, far less usable energy or good hearty food, shall we say. But because of that digestive system, zebras are quite happy to eat poorer quality produce. They eat lots of it and are still able to extract a sufficient amount of nutrition from it. Wildebeest, with that four-chambered stomach, because the food stays an awful long time within their digestive tracts, they have to ensure that they're eating high-quality produce because it remains in the body for quite some time. So they prefer much shorter grass, and they're very, very picky, wildebeest, actually. They will only really choose to eat grass less than about 15 to 20 centimeters tall, and only certain types of grasses. So between the two of them, they do what's called facultative grazing, where they benefit one another. The zebra eats the top part of the grass, and then that makes the grass more manageable, or produces or gives access to the wildebeest to eat that lower portion of the grass, which is far better for them. Also nice to see some red hartebeest briefly in the background there. Not something we see in the low veld. Victor, a very good afternoon to you as well. You wanted to know if I've visited any of the waterhole locations. Well, this one I certainly have been to on a couple of occasions. Tower Game Lodge. I've done some work up in Madikwe, done some stargazing evenings and some astronomy training at various lodges up in Madikwe over the years, as well as visiting friends up there. So yes, I've been to Tower Waterhole. Certainly, there are so many these days. I'm trying to now rack my brains where all the other waterhole locations are. Obviously, I've been into close to Jabulani, Rosie's Pan in Olifants West. I have worked in Olifants West Game Reserve. So some of the ones on the eastern side of the country, and this one up in Madikwe, yes. But not been up to Vic Falls, not been up to Kenya. So all of these on a bucket list that one day I hope to get to, especially now that I've sort of had a bit of a taster by watching these camera feeds. It makes it all the more of an attractive proposition to go and see that habitat and those animals in the flesh. Oh, this little baby zebra's got a bit of a limp. What have you done? Hopefully you've just strained or tweaked something there, nothing too serious. I think that sort of maternal and paternal instinct always kicks in when we see a young animal that looks like it's struggling a little bit. We worry what the future might hold, and without wanting to be too macabre and pessimistic about it, if that is a full-blown injury, I'm looking at that back left leg, looks a little bit swollen, possibly from this angle. Um, it's going to be a difficult life for that zebra. He's going to be the weak link, he or she. It looks like a she, actually. Going to be far easier for predators to pick off. And regrettably, if that injury doesn't heal, then the future doesn't look too rosy for that zebra, which is a real shame. But hanging out with other zebra, hanging out with the wildebeest, should at least give the rest of the members of the group an early warning system. Interesting that he's hanging out with the male there. That's the stallion standing next to the youngster. And we do see some paternal instinct amongst zebra stallions. Of course, it's a harem system we mentioned yesterday. So one male with a group of 4, 5, 6 females with whom he will hopefully father some offspring. Often the males do not play a significant role in terms, or in the animal kingdom, in terms of looking after the youngsters, but we do see it quite often in zebra that if one does get left behind or there's a problem with one of the foals, you'll often see a stallion sort of trying to make sure is okay and trying to look after his vested interests from a genetic point of view. Another little one here at the front looks like it might be having a drink. Trying to. Very young one. Not more than a month or two old, I would think, that one. Wesley, good afternoon or morning or evening, depending on your location, of course. You wanted to know what the survival rate of baby zebras are at Tow Lodge. Um, Honestly, I wouldn't know at a very specific location, nor do I know the official statistic of what a zebra survival rate is. Unfortunately, they are, of course, susceptible to predation. Tow Lodge, well, Madikwe in general does have a very healthy population of lion, certainly, which would be their predominant predator. Um, so I'm afraid I can't give you a specific figure, but as the predator population increases, so does the likelihood of predation of herbivorous species and other prey items as well. So I wouldn't like to put a figure on it, but I'm just trying to think. I mean, it depends. No, I'm not even going to put a figure on it. I would say still reasonably good because there is a good population of zebras, and again, because of their social structure and penchant for hanging out with other animals for early warning systems, that will certainly help. But I don't know an official figure, unfortunately. Look at the attentive nature of this stallion. It's beautiful to see. The youngsters had a quick drink and is now waiting for everybody to move off. Of course, young zebras getting a lot of their fluid requirements from mother's nutritious milk, so they don't need to spend as much time drinking water at this time of their lives. Being harassed by some flies and things around the water's edge by the look of it. Okay, well, it seems it's not just the zebras having a drink this morning. I believe we've got some activity at the aforementioned Rosie's Pan in Olifants West. Let's go see who's joined us there. Looks like we have a young elephant bull enjoying some of nature's elixir. Huge water requirements for such a big animal, as you would imagine. Between 100, 120, maybe even more litres of water required per day to hydrate that huge bulk. And a good excuse for a little bit of body paint as well. Fleeting visit for now, at least. Did look like a young bull, just in terms of size. You can see the sort of the girth across the bridge of the nose, the bridge of the trunk. Get a better look now. That will continue to grow as the elephant ages. Definitely not fully grown yet. Other ways to sort of tell or estimate the age of an elephant would be to look at whether the skin is sagging along the spine, and also the how pronounced the temporal pits are, the temporal lobes on the top of the skull. As they get older, those pits become far deeper. But he doesn't want to stick around. It's a shame. Okay, well, this elephant seems to have disappeared, but it sounds like we may have another elephant at another location having a drink. Let's quickly hop over there. Go from one side of Olifants West to the other. This is Narrated Dam. And a bit of a timeshare going on at that little concrete waterhole there. I thought it was a little strange that the first one vacated so quickly. I think perhaps thought it was a bigger elephant coming in, and then realised that maybe it wasn't such a formidable foe, and decided to just prove a little point. This one actually looks like a female. I don't see any penile sheath hanging down, and you can also see from the forehead much more angular, which is often what we would see in an elephant cow as opposed to the bull, which has a more rounded forehead. I think it was a young male vacating for his elder in hindsight, showing a little respect. Of course, very difficult not to break into song when you say that. I assume there is a pump within that concrete. Looks like a little bit like a well there. All the elephants choosing to drink out of there as opposed to the waterhole itself just to the left. So that will be where the fresh water is being pumped into the dam. And that will always be what the elephants will go for. You'll see them queuing up to stick their trunk around the pipe in these man-made dams quite often. Very picky about the quality of water that they drink, rightly so. A bit of a shower. You see the young male there just raised his trunk towards the back of the female there. Would have just been a quick test of the urine. Just trying to get any information about that cow that he can. And see if that bigger male is going to be happy to share the water. By the way, he's resting his trunk on the rim there. They both are. You see this little one's a little bit tentative. He knows he's bottom of this particular pecking order. It looks like he's going to be tolerated. I think the elephants probably know that there's a plentiful supply of water. But interesting little bit of behaviour where we saw the young male there just flick his trunk in the female's general direction, tying in nicely to your question, Tracy, with how do elephants communicate with each other. Well, that is a huge topic, one that we're still learning about. The answer is in all ways, basically. They'll incorporate pretty much all of the senses. Visual senses, we can see that in the way that a musting bull, so a male elephant who's coming into sort of reproductive mode, increasing in testosterone. You can see by the way that they walk down the road, they have this swagger, this confident air about them, and they will posture with each other in terms of visual communication. Certainly tactile communication is very, very important as well. Touch, we'll see it often when two elephants are interacting with each other. Ooh, slip. Touching each other with those sensitive trunks. And we see some lovely exchanges sometimes between youngsters and their mothers, where they're putting their trunks into each other's mouths. Just very, very sort of tender moments. But the most important, well, the two most important for elephant will be next on the list, I would suggest, will be sound. Of course, elephants famous for their trumpets and their rumblings, but there's an awful lot of audio communication that goes on between elephants which we are not privy to because our ears are not as sensitive. Imagine an animal of that size with that sort of pinnae, the sort of the earlobe around them. Very, very sensitive to picking up sound, and elephants can hear a much lower frequency than we can with our ears, down to about 10 or 12 hertz, whereas we can only get down to about 20 hertz. So there's constant, what we call infrasound, being communicated between members of herds and members that are scattered over far and wide. Those sounds travel very far. The low frequency vibrations travel through the substrate, and we know that elephants pick up these vibrations as well through their sensitive feet. And you'll often see an elephant kind of standing motionless, stock still, and then will continue on what it's doing. More often than not, it's listening to a message that's being passed from long distances. Lots and lots of examples of danger in particular being passed. Females giving off specific rumbles when they're coming into heat, which are picked up by males in must, who will then try and sort of center in on that location for an opportunity to mate. But as with most animals, the most important is the sense of smell. Pheromones, olfactory communication. We see it all the time in animals. Remember, every animal gives off a very distinct scent, particularly found with the pheromones and the hormones released within the urine and the dung. And you'll see animals, again mentioned yesterday, phlegm and grimacing after analysing urine, using a special organ in their mouth to get all the information about whomever popped down that deposit or whoever is giving off those pheromones. And that can be translated, and there's huge amounts of specific information contained therein. So that's a real minefield, but it's a very, very big subject, elephant communication, and a fascinating one at that. Every now and again, you've got to have a bit of a scratch. Questions are coming in thick and fast today. Thank you very much for that. We love hearing from you. Freddie, what other animals are picky with the quality of water that they drink? I purposely gave myself a little bit of time to think on that one, because certainly if you ask me what the most picky, I would most definitely say elephant. I'm struggling to think of anything else off the top of my head which is supremely picky about the quality. I mean, most animals will choose to take fresher water over stagnant water. But I've seen most other animals drink some pretty fetid water over the years, particularly the cats. I mean, they don't care. They'll drink out of a muddy puddle. I honestly can't think of anything else immediately that is as picky as an elephant. So I think water is water, and most of these animals have got the necessary bacteria and enzymes in the stomach to deal with a lot of the stuff you find in some of these waters. Of course, incredibly stagnant. Here, oh, look at the tactile communication. Nobody wants to drink really stagnant water. Sorry about that. It's a shame. We obviously had a bit of a problem with the camera feed there, but a perfect example of tactile communication. Though we've gone back to Tau. Oh, and a dust devil in the background. What you do need to be careful of course, in standing water is the build-up of certain algae. You get the cyanobacteria and the blue-green algae, which is a great source of food for many of the wading birds and things, but too much of it can be a bad thing. You get in the ocean we have things that are called red tides. If you have a real influx of that cyanobacteria, that photosynthetic plant life, that can actually poison the water and make it toxic and lead to deaths. Occasionally you do find water holes being closed in reserves because there has been an outbreak of particular cyanobacteria that can be detrimental to animals. And of course it can have a knock-on effect to the aquatic life underneath with a term called eutrophication, where when you've got too many photosynthetic organisms in one place, yes, they're giving off a lot of oxygen during the day, but at night time they respire and they start to give off too much carbon dioxide into the water. That is a hindrance to the things living in the water, and a thick blanket of material will also block out light, which is able to reach the lower depths. Of course, most organisms on this planet rely on light for photosynthesis, particularly of the plant-based variety. It looks like it might be an elephant day. But Freddie, if anything else pops into my head, I will let you know. Sometimes random memories and knowledge and things that you've read and seen do tend to just miraculously appear in the brain. I'll let you know if it happens. I'll see if this, again, looks like a youngish bull, is going to tolerate other animals around what he is no doubt deeming now his waterhole. See if we have any chasing off of the animals. But it's a big waterhole there at Tower, so I think plenty of space to go around. Definitely walking with purpose. You see, elephants do get quite excited when they're approaching water. He's obviously keeping his emotions in check, but you can see he's speeding up. Got a bit of a wobble going on whilst he walks. Very excited to have a drink shortly. Come down to the water here, don't disappear off to the left. It's a bit shy, that one. Lenny, you're asking, have I ever seen an elephant give birth? Regrettably, I have not. No, and I don't know very many people who ever have, despite the number of elephants. It's a very rare phenomenon to actually witness one giving birth. I've seen footage of it, of course, online and on YouTube and things where recordings have been made. But often happens in quite dense vegetation, and often happens during the night time as well. And even if you were there, you need to be very, very careful, because the whole herd will go into almost a state of frenzy. It's not like with many animals, like the zebra and the wildebeest there, which will go off and find somewhere quiet and secluded and have their baby alone off in the thicket somewhere. It's very much a family occasion for elephants. All the other members of the group will be milling around. They'll be very, very excited. You'll see lots of temporal gland secretions from the females as these sort of emotions manifest themselves physically with the release of hormones. And they would certainly not take too kindly to anybody getting too close. They're also on high alert for predators, because the animal giving birth is very vulnerable. And of course, a young calf potentially would be easy pickings. So it would be an incredible thing to witness, but alas, not something that I have yet seen. I've seen buffalo give birth, I've seen impalas and some other antelopes give birth. I saw my guinea pig give birth many years ago when I used to have guinea pigs, but never an elephant. Buddy, you back to our water debate there. No, hyenas aren't picky at all. Agreed. Um, and they do wee in the water at the same time, as do many other animals as well. I, for one, if I was going to choose water, would probably not urinate in the water that I was going to be drinking. That doesn't particularly appeal. I suppose it would be diluted. But no, hyenas not known for their sanitation and general hygiene, that's for sure. And you can smell it on them as well, it has to be said. particularly lazy. I see a lot of the cats do that, just lying. They just lie and they urinate where they're lying as well. But buffalo, particularly, the buffalo come down and drink, and they all wade into the water. And I'm sure they're sort of stimulated to do so by the water and maybe the sploshing around of the water, but they often urinate and defecate in the water. I always feel rather sorry for the other animals, particularly any resident hippos in there. I think that's rather disrespectful. You can see this wildebeest bull just sort of corralling some of his females. He's the one, there he is, just turning to the left. You can see a little bit stockier, broader shoulder, bigger than the others, larger horns. So just keeping everybody in check there, but quite a magnificent animal, certainly. It's slightly different between the wildebeest and the zebra in terms of their territoriality. Look how much bigger he is than the females. He's actually a beautiful specimen. So a male wildebeest will be territorial over an area. He will scent mark it with his middens. He will scrape the ground. He's got glands in between his front hooves, which are known as pedal glands. He's got preorbital glands in front of his eyes that you'll often see. You'll see him rubbing it on trees and things, usually next to a midden. In fact, if you ever find a wildebeest midden, you'll often find a dark stain on a tree next to it, if there is one. And if you actually sort of breathe on it, that reactivates some of the scent, and you can smell a sort of a musky odor that's come from those glands. So the wildebeest is dominant over an area, and he will quite happily accept any females wandering into that area and try and keep them within his area for mating opportunities, where the zebra is not dominant over an area, but is dominant over his females. So again, wonderful way of nature to do the same thing differently. If we all did things exactly the same way, there would be far too much competition. And both seem to work. He really is a rather spectacular animal, this wildebeest bull on the right there. Not normally an animal that I look at and have a huge amount of appreciation for. They are unusual looking things, but he is quite magnificent. Towering above the rest of them there. He seems very alert. I wonder if the other group of wildebeest, if the male is up and posturing around, if there's another one there, because he looks very concerned with where everybody is. Keeping a good lookout, more so than normal, I would suggest. Good afternoon, Dark Main Lover. Thank you for your message, Dark Main Lover. Glad you're enjoying another amazing live at the Waterhole show. and that you're enjoying all of the sightings and some of our discussions. Long may it continue. Let's do a quick scan over the foreground to see what else we can find. Spurwing goose. And looked like some Egyptian geese and some little goslings there. And a red-knobbed coot in the foreground with that big white bill and casque on top of the head. Oh, possibly the reflection of an elephant. There he is. Miriam, you're asking why elephants have thicker front legs than rear legs. Well, it's all to do with weight, support, and structure, really. If you think of an elephant, the majority. Oh, I wonder if we're going to get. Oh, I thought the elephant might have had a little word with those wildebeest. He still may yet. This is a big boy. It's all to do with weight distribution, Miriam, to be honest. If you look at the physiology of an elephant, the way he's put together, the front half, as is the case with most mammals, is much, much heavier than the back half. You think about the front legs have got to take the weight of those big, broad shoulders, the head, the tusks, the trunk, which is all muscle and therefore very, very heavy. So you need to have a much sturdier, or two much sturdier pillars in order to take that extra weight. That even just that head part of a full-grown elephant like this will weigh best part of a ton, if not more, depending on the size of the tusks, because ivory is also quite heavy, very densely packed. The back legs really only have to support the weight of the pelvis, which is nowhere near as much. So it's important to distribute the weight evenly and make sure you have enough of a support structure to do so. So also you can see the shape of the feet as well. Those front feet of the elephant you can see are nice and round, and the back feet are more oval and sort of elongated in shape, which you can see very clearly in their tracks if you see them on the ground. And you'll almost always find that the front foot of an animal is bigger than the back foot. He's been having fun in the mud. Nice to see the different shades of soils, depending on the different soil types in an area. And quite iron rich, some of that soil by the look of it, with that reddish colour, as opposed to this much more sort of clay-based and more mineral sparse soil here. A lot of it will have been leached away by water flowing into the dam and all the foot traffic from the animals coming down to drink. This is certainly a big boy. I think pushing a good, maybe up to about 6 tons. Definitely a full-grown elephant bull, this one, in comparison to the other elephants that we've been seeing thus far. We've all seen relative sort of teenagers and maybe early 20s. This is a big boy, probably. I'd like to have a look at his those depressions on his forehead to get a better estimation. But I would think probably certainly into his late 30s at least to this one, looking at his general bulk. So you do pretty much keep growing as an elephant. The older you get, the bigger you get. Very much in his prime, and definitely very good reproductive opportunities for him. Sandy, you're asking why do Ellie's always chase away other animals at waterholes when there's no competition? Well, you can see this one didn't. I think this one has been deemed big enough for a lot of groups, and I think the simplest answer is because they can. They do like to prove to other animals that they are the boss. None of this lion being king of the jungle, king of the savannah nonsense. The elephant rules all, in my opinion. Um, I think, yeah, because they can. And they are, I suppose, a bit territorial and protective over a precious resource. Seen it happen time and time again. These poor animals just enjoying hanging out next to a waterhole, not getting in anybody's way. And the next thing you know, the elephants come in and just usher them off, particularly the young bulls. They get a little bit overzealous. Um, or if mothers have got young as well, they can be quite protective. Staying on the vein of elephants drinking, Juliet would like to know whether elephants have a valve in their trunk to stop them slipping water into their lungs. Yes, exactly that. There is a sort of a muscular structure, a valve system, almost like a sphincter, basically, a ball of muscle, a ring of muscle that will stop water going up into the sinuses and into the nasal cavities, which, if any of you know, if you do get water up your nose, it's quite an unpleasant experience. But yeah, elephants have evolved to do exactly that, so they can suck up water into their trunks. Varying suggestions as to how much water that they can hold within their trunks, but yeah, they will fill it, close off that valve at the top of the trunk to ensure that the water doesn't get anywhere it shouldn't, and then use muscular contractions of all of those muscles to squirt the water into their mouth. Beautiful scene now of this lone elephant just gliding. It's incredible an animal that weighs multiple tons can glide and move with such seeming efficiency across the landscape. It just looks very natural, like it's meant to be. Toying with us now, hiding behind the bush. Oh, here he comes. And it is incredible how quiet they can move. We saw earlier, every time they put their feet down, those big spongy pads sort of spreading out, absorbing that great weight. Acts like a perfect shock absorber. and it's very easy for an elephant to slip past unnoticed, incredibly quiet. Seems like we're going to try this area for a drink as well. It's a long walk. Or maybe we'll more of a dust bathe on this part of the pond. Or a mud splatter. So the way he disturbed all of the mud there with his front foot, just waving it forward and backwards to just get some of that mud circulated through the water so he could splash it onto himself. There we go again. Artificial sunblock. Of course, mammals we were discussing yesterday lack that genetic pigment, or that genetic coding of what's called gadusol, which is used in many other organisms, reptiles, birds, amphibians, fish, which act as a natural sunblock. Mammals not privy to that. So melanin, yes, kind of does the same thing in a different way. Otherwise, mud is a particularly good defense against UVB rays. And heat in general, for that matter, blocks the heat out nicely. Let's see if we're happy to share our mud. See again the tactile communication we were talking about. The younger one is just introducing himself and that information being shared. Beautifully tender moments from such potentially devastating creatures. That was very special, particularly that little bit of tactile communication with the trunks. And then a little bit of a flap at the end. Apparently that spelt the end of the exchange. Miriam, you're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed my answer. We try to answer everything we can out here. I'd say please do keep the questions coming. Um, I always find it's far better to have more of an interactive experience. No one really wants me just giving you all a monologue for 2 hours. So always happy to answer any questions, big or small. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and we all learn from each other. I'm glad you are enjoying everything. And Dark Main Lover, you're asking, isn't albino elephant considered a pink elephant? Um, well, we're getting into semantics a little bit now, aren't we? It depends what you consider a pink elephant, really. But certainly, elephants that lack melanin um, will have a much more of a pinker hue to them. I have seen some pinkish elephants. I've never seen a true albino elephant. Remember that true albinism is the absolute absence of any melanin whatsoever, and the most um, what's the word I'm looking for? The most obvious reason for obvious thing to see of a true albino is the red color eyes, because all eye pigment have some form of melanin in them. Whether you have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, it's just different amounts of melanin and the structure of the collagen in the eyes. But a true albino will have absolutely no melanin and therefore red colored eyes. So I've never seen a red colored eyed elephant. I've seen pinkish elephants with bluey coloured eyes, which is again less melanin, so you could argue that's a form of leucism. But I've never seen a true albino. So I think it rather depends, Dark Main Lover, on what you consider a pink elephant. But leucistic elephants do certainly manifest as a more pink colour because of the lack of dark pigment. And going on to that, Dark Main Lover, no, never seen or even pictures of a full-grown albino elephant. Unfortunately, because of the reasons we've discussed, that albinism makes you far more obvious to any potential predators, and particularly have a lot more difficulty in regulating heat. In hot temperatures such as those found in Africa, your chances of getting to adulthood unfortunately are not great. And added to that as well, unfortunately, because of what may be considered a deficit, your chances of mating are not going to be great either. Females will often choose males based upon their characteristics, upon their size, upon birds, for example, and their colorations. Brighter colours often suggests better genetics, more obvious, better advertisement. So I would think even if an albino or even a leucistic elephant does get to full size, its breeding success or breeding opportunities are likely to be much more limited. Mindy Power, you're saying yes, if you're seeing elephants for the first time, you think they're brown instead of grey. Well, in this area, you would. But take a look at that, the rock colour and the soil colour in the background, and you'll see that the overriding coloration of most of the areas in this part of the country, up in the Madikwe Game Reserve, is characterised by this quite orangey, red, ruddy type soil. And as we just saw, elephants and many other animals do love rolling around in the mud, spraying it upon themselves, and they will paint themselves with that colour. So it's like body paint. So you'll find that elephants in different areas of the country or different areas of the continent will manifest with different colours depending on the geology of that area. But if you were to give the elephant a bath and clean it completely, it would look like a sort of a slatey grey colour as a rule. It's also the origin of the word the white rhino. I know many of you may have heard this story of the white coming or being a misrepresentation of the word wight from the Dutch language, referring to wide, and the shape of a white rhino's mouth being much wider than that of the black, and that white rhino was born by a misunderstanding of the word wight. That's one theory. The more likely um, answer to that conundrum actually came from when white rhinos were first documented and, or sort of officially documented, not discovered. That was by a very well-known British naturalist by the name of William John Burchell. What the zebras we've just seen, which are now plain zebras, used to be called Burchell zebras. We have Burchell starlings, Burchell's kukels. His name is associated with quite a few organisms out in Africa on his travels. But when he first saw the white rhino and recorded them, he was in the Northern Cape, where there is a lot of calcrete. Calcrete, as the name suggests, is a type of soil which is very rich in calcium and therefore is very whitish in colour. And with rhinos' love of rolling around in the mud, it is most likely that when he first saw that species of rhino, they were very white in colour. And he made the same sort of mistake and assumed that that was the natural colour of a rhino. You'll find the warthogs in a particular way as well are also very sort of reddish orange in colour for the same reason. Darkbane lover, good. I'm glad I've managed to give you some information there on leucistic elephants and pink elephants and albino elephants. Glad to have been of help. So yeah, keep the questions coming. It's wonderful to have so many questions and comments coming through today. Please do keep it up, everybody, and I hope you're enjoying what we've seen thus far. Well over halfway already and lots of activity. Well, things seem to have settled down a little bit at Tower now, but that was a lovely half an hour or so spent there, or 20 minutes. So I think we're going to head a little bit further northeast now, up into Victoria Falls, and see what's happening in Zimbabwe. Right, beautiful close-up view of a hooded vulture. Sunning himself, wings open, absorbing all of that sunlight, warming up the muscles in those wings. Still a little bit of fluff around the back of the neck there, so I would imagine this is some sort of almost completely adult. The younger ones do have a little bit more fluff around the head. So maybe just transitioning, maybe doing a little bit of feather maintenance. Spring. Got it, we're going to lie down. Very sort of phoenix-like pose that this vulture has adopted, spreading out all of those feathers, warming them up, and also potentially dealing with parasites as well, cooking those parasites, making it a little bit more uncomfortable for any small creatures living in those feathers and causing them to move away. But it's also well known with a behaviour called anting, where they will lie down like that and sort of slosh around in the sand and encourage ants to actually swarm through their feathers. And that formic acid of the ants acts like an insecticide to keep parasites away. So the ants may also eat some of those parasites. And in some species of birds, it's well documented, they will actually pick up an ant, which will, in their beak, which will cause the ant to give off that formic acid, and they've been seen visibly wiping it through their feathers. So just like you or I applying insect repellent. Actually, amazing sort of almost tool use of birds physically applying insect repellent to their feathers. So just be doing some general maintenance of those feathers, particularly the flight feathers, making sure they're all zipped up nicely. If you've ever run your fingers the wrong way along a feather and you see all those little barbs come apart, all the little filaments, and then very easy to run your finger the correct way up the feather and zip everything back together. There are little things called barbacells and barbacules on those little veins of the feathers, which lock almost like Velcro into position. It's kind of like a zip. And if they do come apart and they're not very efficient, that makes flight a lot more difficult. So you'll often see birds running their beaks through their feathers and just making sure that they've got a nice solid plane, particularly on the leading edge of the feathers, to make flight more efficient. But you'll see that as quite a distinctive behaviour. This very much is a grooming session being indulged upon by this hooded vulture. Quentin, you're asking how birds regulate their temperature. Well, we saw one example of it there, lying outstretched, potentially warming up the muscles. You'll often see them early in the morning sitting on exposed perches, sunbathing. You also get some birds, which will do so when they've got full stomachs, because the heat will stimulate bacteria in their stomachs to help with digestion. The other main behaviour you'll see with birds is what's called gular flapping. Which is really the bird equivalent of panting, because birds can't really sweat and they're covered in those feathers. On a very hot day, you'll see a bird sitting on a perch with its beak open, and you can see the tongue pumping up and down just like a dog would pant or a cat would pant. And it has exactly the same effect, that evaporative cooling. Just the motion of that tongue passes the air across the tongue, that cools the pores on the surface of the tongue, cools the blood, and that gets circulated throughout the rest of the body. The other way you'll see them deal with temperature is to do with their legs, because they have bare legs, most birds, with the exception of the true eagles. So if it's particularly cool or particularly warm, you might see them standing on, or particularly cool, I should say, standing on one leg. That will eliminate some heat loss through that exposed skin. And we mentioned it a couple of days ago, or possibly yesterday, particularly with the marabou storks we often see here at Vic Falls Safari Lodge. And other birds known to do it as well, behaviour called hydrosis, where birds actively defecate on their legs, and that white, very concentrated uric acid secretion helps to reflect heat off the legs. Dark Main Lover also commenting on the lovely outstretched wings that we saw a moment ago. Yeah, lovely to see something a bit different. Prairie Dog also commenting that this is epic sighting. Excellent work by our zoomies. Controlling the camera. I have no control over what we're looking at. And of course, our wonderful directors. Chulu is with me at the moment in Zimbabwe, I doubt it, in Johannesburg, along with the rest of the team. Sandy Franklin, you thought that vulture was funny, and you've never seen them do that before. You'll often see vultures standing there with their wings outspread like that. Sometimes you see great big groups of them doing it. But it was nice to see him lying flat on the ground. That you don't see all too often, certainly. I think so, making use of the hot African sunlight. Casper also commenting on the vultures and their huge wingspan. They are very, very impressive birds, and you have to feel a little bit sorry for the vultures. So they do get a lot of bad press ever since the days of the Lion King and Jungle Book and those sorts of things. They've always been seen in a very negative light, but they are very, very impressive birds and hugely important to the environment from a sanitation perspective. But yeah, massive wingspans, good couple of meters long or wide. Oh, look at that beautiful kudu bull. Don't get to see as many kudus as I would like, particularly not the bulls. They can be very, very elusive, these big bulls, but what a magnificent animal. Of course, sandparks in Southern Africa or South Africa, that's their logo, the kudu kop, kudu head. A really regal animal. I have to say, my parents have been lucky enough to join me on safari many times, and I know it's my father's favourite animal. He gets very, very excited to see a huge kudu bull like that with his spiralling horns. Going back to the vultures, I see Dark Main Lover's been in contact again. Are there any vultures going extinct because of humans poisoning them and killing them? Yeah, unfortunately, pretty much all of them. Dark Main Lover, to be honest, pretty much all vultures are becoming endangered these days because of poisoning for traditional medicines, um, that alleged power of foresight, predicting the future because of vultures' uncanny ability to allegedly predict an animal's demise and also just to appear seemingly out of nowhere at a carcass. So that is a big problem within the traditional muti trade, as it's known. And also in recent years, because of the increase in rhino poaching, then we are seeing a lot of vultures unfortunately being poisoned because poachers have been known to poison rhino carcasses after they have killed them because they know that vultures will give away the position of a carcass and that will alert the authorities. So if they can reduce the number of vultures circling, attracting attention to a particular area, then better chance for them to get away. So unfortunately that, on top of deforestation and of course all the other problems that we've been plagued with over the years with humans' relentless expansion, vultures are indeed in a little bit of trouble. So we seem to have a rather static kudu at the moment. Just like one or two feed issues with the camera. Yes, he is a big boy. He's a very stationary big boy at the moment. Sorry, we've had to go over to Juma, obviously having some problems there, but yeah, he was a very, very beautiful kudu. Quite normal to see them on their own, but also do see them as bachelor groups as well. Generally speaking, if you do see a big kudu bull with females, he is there for one reason and one reason only. He's there for mating purposes. Otherwise, they generally lead a relatively solitary and clandestine existence, preferring to stay in the thicker areas normally, because that's where the majority of their browse is, being browsing animals feeding on leaves and twigs, or not so much twigs, but particularly leaves, as opposed to grazing animals like the zebra and the wildebeest that prefer to occupy more open areas. Nice to see my old stomping ground at Juma. Hope to have a chance to get back there at some point in the next few months, I hope. Looks like a little something hiding in the shadows just to the left there, possibly an inyala. You can see some movement just to the left of that skeletal leadwood tree there. Interesting to see the changes in the colour of the vegetation. I know they've had a reasonable amount of rain recently at Juma, but as we're coming into autumn, you can see how the grass is beginning to turn. A lot of leaves developing that lovely orange colour, very synonymous with autumn throughout the world, regardless of the hemisphere, depending on the months, of course. Going to be tough times for the animals for the next few months. A lot less food availability, less places to hide, and of course in South Africa coming into our drier season, where it's quite normal not to have any rain for months on end. It's an awful lot of strain on the herbivorous population. So I see the Lily Dam is still a hive of activity with our elephants. And look at the little ones all clambering to get into the little well, Pecky's fresh water. How awesome to see. Looks like we may have a couple of feed problems today. Apologies for that. Oh, there we go. We have some more movement. These two having a little bit of a discussion on the water's edge. Sorry for the little bit of breakup, everybody, but of course we are broadcasting from some very remote locations, and occasionally there are a couple of gremlins that sneak in. And hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. Okay, I think we're going to try back up to Vic Falls in Zimbabwe and see if the Vulture is still hanging around. Again, you can see the very red soil there, similar to that of Madikwe, different to the eastern side of the country and other areas. Any elephants that we were to see in this area would also be characterized by that very red coloration. It looks like some lovely mapani trees in the foreground. And again, you can see the colors beginning to change. We've got some lovely shades of green and orange and yellow. And there is the marabou stork that we mentioned earlier with his habit of defecating on his legs. Those legs you can see are very white in colour, but actually they are black. But that is those uric acid secretions which have coated the legs to help reflect the heat. But it is a spectacular time of year, particularly to photograph with all those changing colours. So generally what happens is the tree will respond to the changes in the length of day. It will create a seal at the stalk of the leaf, and that will seal off all the energy going to the leaf. So chlorophyll, which is constantly breaking down, but normally being restocked, is now no longer able to be restocked. And that reveals some of the pre-existing pigments in the skin of those leaves, those reds and those oranges, until ultimately they shrivel and fall off. But the sugars and energy that has been trapped in those leaves will still give browsing animals a little bit of fodder. They will see animals still eating leaves and old seed pods and things. There's some good carbohydrate energy still to be had there. Dexterous neck that these birds have in order to reach some of those parts. So an impala went skipping along the back. I see another marabou in the background. Not sure what disturbed the impala. Another kudu. Maybe that's what disturbed the impala. How great to see yet another awesome kudu bull. Thank you, Jive Bunny. Thanks. Nice to have me back, and thanking us for a wonderful show thus far. Oh, it's a wonderful show every day. Nature doesn't need much help. There's always something to find and something to see and something to learn for all of us, but I'm glad you're enjoying it. Jackie Darling, where's my favourite place to go and what is on my bucket list? I've been so lucky to visit some incredible places, certainly. I was very keen to go to New Zealand, of course, which I have now done so, seen some of those that incredible scenery and those wonderful dark skies. I'd always wanted to go to Namibia. I've been lucky enough to do that a couple of times now. I think the one place that I haven't been to yet that I'd very much like to get to is Zambia. I've been on both sides of it, but never actually ventured into the country. And I'd love to get to South Luangwa. I don't really know why. It's just one of those places I've always wanted to visit. and I know Zimbabwe is a great place to go for a lot of wetland birding. And I've also recently decided that I'm going to have to do one of these Palearctic um, boat trips to go and find some of the seabirds in and around South Africa. I was never particularly interested in it. I found it all rather daunting. But having been out on a boat a couple of times in New Zealand and lucky enough to tick off a few albatrosses and mollymawks, which are like the lesser albatrosses, a couple of different petrels, I'm quite intrigued to pursue the idea of a bit more marine birding as well. So I've got lots of things on the list. Jackie also asking about having an astronomy lesson at some point. Well, if you know me, you know I'd be very, very happy to do that, but it's such an intimidating large subject. I think best is if any of you do have any questions, feel free to send them my way. But if I can find a tenuous link to some form of astronomical phenomenon, I will do my best to pop it into the conversations. Connie, yes, you're amazed as to how those skinny little legs hold up such a big body. I would agree with you, although from a bird leg perspective, those are quite chunky, solid looking legs. You do get some incredibly unstable looking birds. Take the stilts that we often see at Tower Waterhole there, the black-winged stilts. They've got incredibly long legs and they're like as thick as a toothpick. And yes, of course, the bird isn't particularly heavy, but how they keep their balance is a bit of a mystery, to be honest. The big, wide splayed toes obviously help, but it's a great feat of mechanics, certainly, to have the relevant stability. Julian Thomas suggesting that the marabou stork is possibly the ugliest bird in the world. Now, normally I'd say, oh, Shane, that's a bit harsh. But Julian Thomas, I would have to probably agree with you. It breaks my heart to have negative things to say about a bird, but it really isn't a looker. It's the honorary chief member of the Ugly Five for very good reason, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't have words to describe it, unfortunately. But no, it's not one of the prettier members of the avian family or the avian class of organisms, but it does serve a purpose. Mm, a nice group of looks like a mixture of vultures and storks riding the thermals, gaining some height. Of course, particularly the vultures and the eagles. I'm honestly not too sure about stork vision, but for the vultures, get high, particularly high up in the air, and use that incredible vision that they've got that all raptors have to scan for potential foodstuffs. It can be very difficult to do birding when all you're seeing is silhouettes. Obviously, be very careful if you're using binoculars looking up to the sky that you don't look directly at the sun. That would not be good for you, but you can begin to pick out different species based on their silhouette of what we call the jizz in the industry, the general impression of shape and size. So the storks, in this case the marabous, very large beaks, and they've got their legs stretched out as well. The vultures a little bit more stout, and you can see some of them have got sort of little fingertips at the end of their wings. That's actually an adaptation just to help equalize the differing air pressures above and below the wings, so it's not unstable. It allows us the two different pressures to fuse together in a more diffuse manner and just avoid any turbulence, really. It can be quite challenging identifying different species of vultures in flight, but they all do have different patterns on their underwings. It's just something that you have to learn. It does require a little bit of patience and a half decent pair of binoculars, although any sort of 8 times pair of binoculars is normally good enough. Moonboom Smith, you're asking how soon before it starts to get cold. Well, it'll already be getting cool. I saw the weather at the beginning of the show in most of the southern African locations there. Daytime temperatures up to about 30 degrees and nighttime dropping to the mid to low teens. So that will continue to drop over the coming months down to the single figures, low single figures in some places. But it's already getting cooler, certainly. But what are we in now? Just end of April. By June, it's properly cold, particularly first thing in the morning and last thing at night, or when the sun is not high in the sky. It always amazes me how quickly the temperature drops when the influence of the sun is not so obvious. As soon as it disappears, the temperature plummets. Possibly a pied kingfisher. Yes, it is. There was a pied kingfisher. Just took off. Looked like a female from the markings on the chest. The two black patches. Oh, did you catch something? No, I don't think so. Yes, I think yes. It's got a fish. See those battering the fish around. I think anyway. Hard to see from here. You have to knock the fish around to try and stun it on a branch so it can be swallowed. Oh. Maybe, maybe not. Can't tell if she caught anything. Possibly not if she went back again, unless she dropped it. Lion dog asking whether storks and herons all hunt and feed all day. I think more so during the daytime than the nighttime. I'm not 100% sure. I think it also will depend on the success rate. Most things will avoid the absolute heat of the day and not expending too much energy. But I couldn't tell you exactly what sort of percentage of the day is spent feeding. Not often you'll see them doing too much during the night time though, but generally speaking, there'll be a more activity early morning and late afternoon. Oh, another big splash. Possibly the other one of the pair on that little tree stump to the right as well. Casper, you enjoying the sky dance that we just saw there of all those circling birds of prey and the storks? I agree, it's quite the sight to behold. Oh yes, yeah, perfect weather, warmer days and cooler nights. I'd love that for your winters. I'm not sure exactly where you are. If you have told me already, my apologies. I have didn't commit that one to long-term memory, but I agree. I find one of the hardest parts of being in Africa. I don't mind the hot days; you can deal with that, but it's the hot, humid, sticky evenings can be really rather uncomfortable. So that's perfect for me. Nice and warm during the day, and then cooling off at night time. There's something enjoyable, snuggling up under duvet as opposed to sweating on the top of it. Excuse me, everyone. Oh, here comes a warthog. Spats, you're asking whether vultures consider marabou storks a threat. No, not really. Despite the fact that they are quite sizable birds, they're not really aggressive by nature. And we've seen it many times at kill sites where there is carrion or a dead animal there. The marabou storks are just not really equipped to do the same job as the vultures. They'll take chunks of meat if they're lying around, but they can't find it very difficult to sort of strip meat off bone the same way a vulture would. So you often see the marabou sort of milling around in the background, and they'll take their opportunities when they can, but no real threat. I don't think I've ever seen a vulture chasing away a marabou for that matter either. Julian Thomas, you're agreeing with me. Speaking of marabous, we love all birds and everything has its place, but they're just not very pretty. Yes, well said. Unfortunate for them. and I'm sure to some they are seen as gorgeous, perhaps to each other, but not the greatest aesthetics, it has to be said. Hey, 40, going back to our discussion about the size of legs and things, I was saying that you even think elephant legs look small considering their size. I suppose you could argue that, yeah, they do an awful lot of good work, but they obviously work very well. You don't often see elephants lying down. It does happen from time to time. They do take little snoozes, lean up against things, sometimes completely go flat. I wonder if they don't get arthritis and painful joints after a while. But I think if an elephant had even bigger legs, they would look a little bit silly, I would think. Don't know, it's difficult to picture them knowing what they look like. But if you've ever actually seen an elephant leg up close, or touched one, or picked up an elephant femur or some of their bones, they're they're certainly not small. An elephant femur is probably best part of a meter long, and it's even just like the, the thickest part of the actual bone itself, not including the ball joints at either end. Still looking at probably about 5 inches thick or so, and it's properly heavy. Probably 10, 12 kilograms at least, if not more, for an elephant femur. Oh, you're in Michigan, then yes, cold days and nights in winter. I imagine it gets very, very cold over there. Yes, I like it cool, but I think that might be pushing it. So we completely neglected our little warthog family who came in for a drink. Nice. Oop, catch up. A couple of questions coming through from Mindy Tillipal. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for all the questions. It's been lovely to have so many questions coming through. Wanted to know what the word for large flocks that move as one. I wonder how they never bump into each other. Well, those are both very good questions and very good points. Um, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the large flocks. There are collective nouns for birds that you may be referring to. So the most famous one is probably a murmuration of starlings. You see those massive groups of starlings all wheeling and flocking together. The behavior of being able to sort of act almost like a singular consciousness like that in terms of behavior is known as allolomimetic behavior. Um, it's probably most easily explained by something like bird calls, things like the red-billed woodhoopers that we have, or the Aramark babblers, those groups of birds where one starts calling and the rest all do the same thing. You could argue that that idea of yawns being contagious is also an example of allolomimetic behavior. One starts it and everybody else continues. And that way of birds that flock, one moves and their very sensitive eyesight picks up that movement and has a knock-on effect throughout the flock. So hopefully that's what you were referring to. And you're also asking why some animals swallow their food without chewing. Um, well, it could be a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're in a rush, sometimes they don't have the necessary dentition to chew their food properly. Remember, chewing requires things like molars that we have at the back of our teeth, whereas most carnivores, the cats and the dogs, they lack molars. Their molars have adapted to become what are known as carnassials, which are like scissors. That's why you'll see them eating on one side of their sort of on their mouth, and you can hear it cutting like a pair of scissors, like a blade through the meat, and then swallowing it full. And rather than wasting time of chewing it, the stomach acids do the job for them. So it's just a way really to save a little bit of energy, um, get the food in the stomach quickly. That's why lions have such bulbous stomachs after they've fed, and then those strong stomach acids do all of the work for them. Carnivorous birds, of course, don't have teeth. Teeth are very, very heavy. And if you're flying, you don't want heavy things in your mouth. So swallow it whole, store it in the crop if needs be, and then let the muscular stomach of a bird known as the gizzard, it's a sort of grinding action, do the chewing for you once it's already in the stomach. Birds also swallowing stones to help with that abrasive chewing nature of the gizzard. Looks like we've got a sneaky yellow-billed stork having a bit of a rest in the shade. We were talking about thermoregulation the other day. There's one way of doing it: stay out of the sun. And no, it doesn't have broken legs. I know it looks as if those legs are folded the wrong way, but remember those are ankles, not knees, just because of the structure of a bird's feet. So they do seem to bend the wrong way. Cosmic Carol, happy Earth Day to everybody. I didn't even mention it, but yes, it is. It was Earth Day and Earth Week. So what a wonderful way to spend it, watching all of these natural inhabitants of our lovely planet, enjoying them to the max. Guinea fowl wandering around in the back there and in amongst these Mapani thickets. See the way a lot of those bilobed leaves of the Mapanis have folded over. That's another way of dealing with heat loss, even though Mapani leaves do have quite a waxy coating, which helps to protect them from water loss. When it's very, very hot, they do sort of close in on themselves to reduce water loss. And when it's cooler and at night time, they then open up. It's not such an issue to worry about losing water then. These are the helmeted guinea fowl with those very characteristic blue faces and casques. Oh, little disagreement. Obviously a good spot of some seeds and things on the ground there. One of our heron species just wandering into the water here. Ooh, our kingfisher having another dive. Let's see which heron that is. I thought I saw some reddish colour. You do get something called a rufous something heron. I'll have to double check the exact name. Not one that I've seen often. In fact, I think I've only ever seen one once or twice. The rufous backed heron. I think we saw a black heron here yesterday. Rufous bellied heron. Yes, rufous bellied heron, perhaps, or a black heron. Rufous bellied normally does have yellow legs and a little bit of rufous around the wings. Hard to say for sure. No, I think we're going to go to black heron. We saw that characteristic hunting technique there. Look. Brilliant, the Batman cape. We're going to go with the black heron for that one. Very cool to see. You don't see that very often. Well, unless you're in an area where you see lots of black herons, of course. But as you tell, I've always find that rather amusing. But a brilliant way of cutting out the glare. Hey, 40, I'm glad you've enjoyed the show again today, and you're very welcome. I'm glad you were able to join us. Of course, we do this every day. I'll be back again tomorrow, I think, for my last of my 5 days. Very much looking forward to it. I hope I'll get another opportunity at some point in the future. But it really has been great to hear from everybody so much today, and I'm sorry for the occasional issues we've had at one or two of the cameras. Sorry, that gives me great delight. This little heron. Look at him go. Like a giant umbrella. Looking for pastures greener. But that was wonderful to see. I do enjoy those little black herons. All right, we're going to try for the last 5 minutes or so to go back to Narrated Dam. Hopefully the feed is a little bit more stable, because it sounds like we've still got some elephants drinking at the dam. Let's go have a look. Nice way to finish up. Still a nice little congregation enjoying themselves there, the little one. Been an elephant day today. We've had lots of elephants at different cameras today. I think that's normally around about the time when I ask all of you wonderful viewers what your highlights of the day has been thus far. I think for me it was those two elephants interacting with each other at Tau. We saw that beautiful big bull wandering across the plains, and then when the second one came down and we saw them just touching trunks and touching each other's faces. I think that was very, very special to see. But if there's anything else, oh, and the black heron as well, because apparently I have a thing for those. But any other highlights that you've had, always interested to hear. But it's been another fantastic day, and just a shame we're running out of time again. Casper, you're thanking us. Well, you're very welcome for a wonderful Earth Day waterhole safari with smiles and education. Absolutely, the two should go hand in hand. Still see a lot of fanning of the ears going on, testament to still the heat, not quite in full winter cold just yet. Now they've got that water splashed on the back of the ears, fanning the ears, cools down the blood in those capillaries, sends it around the rest of the body. It takes about 20 minutes for blood to be circulated around a fully grown elephant. So it works very similar to a car radiator, really cooling the water and then sending it throughout the rest of the engine. Oh, well, I don't know what happened there. Somebody got a fright. Look at the way all the other elephants are reacting. Defensive postures, come to investigate the danger. I think a little one came to have a look, and Mum just put her trunk in front of her legs and said, "Nope, stop, I need to check the coast is clear." Guess you enjoyed the vultures. Oh yes, our stretching vulture was very good, and yes, the kudu bulls as well. We've seen lots of amazing things. Dark Main Lover also thanking us for a truly great show. Loved all the sightings and wishes us a wonderful day. Well, we wish the same to you and everybody else who's been watching. We are down to the last minute of the show, so I hope you will join us again tomorrow, same time. I would say same place, but who knows which camera we'll end up on. But yeah, it's been another fantastic day. Day of elephants. Well, we are pretty much out of time, everybody, but a happy Earth Day. Do enjoy the rest of our feeds, and I will see you all tomorrow.